My name is Vivian Thompson. I'm 72 years old from Chicago, Illinois, and I'm about to tell you how my entire family thought they could have me declared mentally incompetent to steal my $2.3 million fortune while I was recovering from a minor stroke, not knowing they'd picked the wrong woman to mess with. You see, I'd spent 32 years as a forensic accountant for the IRS, specializing in complex financial fraud, cases and asset concealment schemes that taught me exactly how criminals hide money and manipulate legal systems. It started 6 months ago when I had what doctors called a transient ischemic attack, a mini-stroke that left me with temporary speech difficulties for about 3 weeks. At 72, any neurological event is concerning, but thank God it was minor. The doctors at Northwestern Memorial kept me for observation for 4 days, then sent me home with speech therapy and instructions to rest. During my recovery, my 3 children, Marcus, Denise, and Kevin, suddenly became extremely attentive. Marcus, my eldest at 48, started visiting twice a week instead of his usual monthly obligation. Denise, 45, began calling daily to check on my cognitive function. Kevin, my baby at 42, offered to help manage my complicated finances since they might be too much for me to handle alone. "Mama, we're just worried about you," Denise said during one visit, her voice dripping with false concern. "After what happened, maybe it's time to consider letting us help with the important decisions. You know, just to make sure everything's protected." I should have recognized that phrase, everything's protected. In my 32 years investigating financial crimes, I'd heard it 1,000 times from criminals trying to justify stealing from vulnerable victims, but I trusted my children. I'd raised them, sacrificed for them, and built my fortune through decades of honest work specifically to secure their futures. The idea that they might be plotting against me seemed impossible. The discovery came when I overheard a phone conversation that changed everything. I was napping in my bedroom when I heard voices in my living room, Marcus and Denise talking in hushed, urgent tones. "The lawyer says we need medical documentation of her incompetency," Marcus was saying. "Dr. Peterson already agreed to say the stroke affected her judgment. We just need 2 more doctors to sign off." "What about the financial records?" Denise asked. "She keeps everything locked up tight." "Kevin's working on that. He's been copying documents during his visits, and his girlfriend at the bank is helping him access her accounts. Once we get the competency ruling, we'll have power of attorney and can start moving assets." My blood turned to ice as I realized what I was hearing. My own children were orchestrating a systematic plan to have me declared mentally incompetent so they could steal my life savings. "The house alone is worth $800,000, Marcus continued, "plus the investment accounts, the IRA, and the life insurance policies. We're looking at over $2 million. Split 3 ways, that's almost $800,000 each," Denise calculated. "Enough to pay off all our debts and then some." That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, processing the magnitude of my children's betrayal. They weren't just planning to steal my money. They were planning to destroy my mental competency, my legal rights, and my dignity in the process. But Marcus, Denise, and Kevin made one fatal mistake in their criminal conspiracy. They forgot that their loving mother hadn't just worked for the IRS for 32 years. I'd been the forensic accountant who built cases against the most sophisticated financial criminals in the country, people who thought they were too smart to get caught. Children thought they were dealing with a confused, elderly stroke victim who wouldn't notice her rights and assets being stolen. Instead, they'd declared war on Vivian Thompson, a retired IRS investigator who'd spent 3 decades learning exactly how to catch financial criminals and destroy them completely. The battle for my fortune had begun, but only I knew the rules of the game we were about to play. Before I tell you how I destroyed my own children, you need to understand exactly what they were trying to steal from me and the lifetime of sacrifice those assets represented. Every dollar in my $2.3 million estate was earned through honest work, careful investment, and personal sacrifice that my ungrateful children had watched me make for their benefit. I started at the IRS in 1989 as a junior auditor, fresh out of DePaul University with an accounting degree and $28,000 in student loan debt. While other young women were spending money on clothes and nightlife, I was living in a tiny studio apartment, eating ramen noodles, and putting every extra penny toward paying off those loans and building my future. By 1995, I'd worked my way up to senior auditor, specializing in complex tax fraud cases. My salary had grown to $45,000 a year, good money for a single mother in Chicago. But I wasn't just supporting myself. I was raising 3 children after their father walked out when Kevin was 2 years old. Every week for 18 years, I worked 40-hour days at the IRS, then came home to help with homework, cook dinner, and manage a household on a tight budget. While other single mothers struggled to make ends meet, I was building both a career and a nest egg through careful financial planning and sacrifice. When Marcus graduated high school in 1995, I'd saved $15,000 for his college education, money that came from working overtime, skipping vacations, and buying generic groceries for 3 years. When he chose Northwestern University, I took out a second mortgage on my small South Side house to cover the additional $40,000 he needed. "Mama, I promise I'll make you proud," Marcus told me at his graduation. "This education is going to change our whole family's future." I made the same sacrifice for Denise when she graduated in 1998, and again for Kevin in 2001. Over 6 years, I invested $165,000 in my children's college educations, money that came directly from my salary and the equity in my home. But my biggest investment in their futures came through my IRS work. By 2000, I'd been promoted to forensic accountant, investigating complex financial fraud cases that paid $75,000 a year. Instead of upgrading my lifestyle, I was funding my children's graduate school, helping with their first apartments, and building the investment portfolio that would become their inheritance. When Marcus decided to attend law school in 2003, I liquidated my retirement savings to give him $80,000 for tuition and living expenses. When Denise wanted to start her own marketing business in 2005, I provided $50,000 in startup capital. When Kevin needed help buying his first house in 2010, I co-signed his mortgage and provided the $60,000 down payment. Over 20 years, I calculated that I'd invested $435,000 directly in my children's educations, businesses, and life opportunities. Money that came from my IRS salary, my careful savings, and my belief that investing in family was the most important thing I could do with my wealth. But I wasn't just giving them money. I was building my own financial security through decades of careful investment. My IRS salary allowed me to max out my 401k contributions every year, and my forensic accounting expertise taught me how to identify solid investment opportunities. By 2010, when I retired from the IRS after 32 years, my pension was worth $4,200 a month, and I'd accumulated $1.2 million in retirement accounts. I owned my house free and clear, now worth $800,000. In Chicago's Bronzeville neighborhood, and had $500,000 in additional investments and savings. My total net worth was $2.3 million, built through 3 decades of honest work, careful planning, and personal sacrifice for my family's benefit. During family dinners, I'd often talked about my estate planning, explaining how everything would be divided equally among the 3 of them after my death. My will, drafted by the same attorney who'd handled my divorce in 1991, left each child approximately $750,000 plus equal shares in my house and personal property. "Y'all don't need to worry about your mama's future," I'd tell them during Sunday dinners. I worked 32 years to make sure this family is financially secure for generations. But apparently, waiting for their inheritance wasn't good enough for Marcus, Denise, and Kevin. They wanted access to my money while I was still alive, and they were willing to have me declared mentally incompetent to get it. They'd watched me sacrifice everything to build their futures, fund their educations, and create generational wealth for our family. And their gratitude was to plot behind my back to steal everything I'd worked my entire life to accumulate. That was their choice. Now they were about to learn what happened when you tried to steal from someone who'd spent 32 years catching financial criminals and building cases that sent them to federal prison. What I discovered next revealed that my children's plot to have me declared incompetent wasn't a recent idea born from concern about my stroke. It was a sophisticated criminal conspiracy they'd been developing for over a year, using my medical event as the perfect legal cover for their theft. The morning after overhearing Marcus and Denise's conversation, I did what any retired forensic accountant would do when facing financial crimes. I activated the investigative skills that had made me legendary at the IRS. If my children were planning to steal my fortune, there would be a paper trail, and I was going to find it. My first call was to Dr. Peterson, my primary physician for 15 years. "Doctor, I need to ask you something confidential. Has anyone from my family contacted you about my mental competency or medical condition?" There was a long pause. "Vivian, your son Marcus called last month asking about the effects of your stroke on cognitive function. He seemed very concerned about your ability to manage financial decisions. What did you tell him?" "I told him that your stroke was minor and that you'd made a complete recovery with no lasting effects on your mental capacity. But he kept pressing, asking if I thought you might need assistance with complex decisions." Marcus had been fishing for medical opinions he could use to support an incompetency petition. When Dr. Peterson wouldn't cooperate, they'd obviously found other doctors who would. Next, I called my attorney, Robert Williams, who'd handled my estate planning for 20 years. "Robert, has anyone from my family contacted you about my will or estate recently?" "Actually, yes. Your daughter Denise called 2 weeks ago, asking about the process for updating your will if you became unable to make decisions for yourself. She said she was concerned about your health and wanted to understand your options." Denise had been researching the legal process for taking control of my assets while I was still alive. Combined with Marcus's medical fishing expedition, the picture was becoming clear. That afternoon, I hired Jennifer Martinez, a private investigator who specialized in family financial crimes. "Jennifer, I need a complete investigation of my 3 children's financial situations and any recent legal consultations they've had." Within 48 hours, Jennifer had uncovered evidence that made my worst suspicions look conservative. "Vivian, your children are all drowning in debt," Jennifer reported during our meeting at her downtown office. "Marcus owes $180,000 in credit card debt and student loans. His law practice is failing, and he's behind on his mortgage. Denise's marketing business is bankrupt, and she owes $95,000 to creditors. Kevin lost his job 6 months ago and is facing foreclosure on the house you helped him buy." But the most damaging discovery was what Jennifer found in their communications and recent activities. "Your children have been meeting with elder law attorney Patricia Collins for the past 3 months, discussing guardianship procedures and competency evaluations," Jennifer continued. "They've also been researching your assets through public records and bank contacts." Jennifer showed me printed emails between my children, discussing their inheritance timeline and dividing up my assets before I was even dead. Marcus had been calculating the value of my house. Denise had been researching my investment accounts, and Kevin had been mapping my bank relationships. They've been planning this for over a year, waiting for the right medical event to justify an incompetency petition, Jennifer explained. "Your stroke gave them exactly the cover they needed. But the most shocking discovery came when Jennifer traced their recent financial activities. All 3 of my children had been making purchases and taking on additional debt in the past 6 months, spending money they expected to steal from me. Marcus put a down payment on a new BMW, expecting to pay it off with your money. Denise booked a luxury cruise for next month, planning to celebrate her inheritance. Kevin has been shopping for vacation homes in Florida, using your projected assets as collateral for his dreams. They weren't just planning to steal my money. They'd already started spending it in their minds, treating my lifetime of savings as their personal ATM fund. That evening, I sat in my living room looking at 60 years of family photos and made peace with what I had to do next. My children thought they were dealing with a confused elderly stroke victim who wouldn't notice her legal rights being stolen. Instead, they'd declared war on a retired IRS forensic accountant who'd spent 32 years building cases against financial criminals more sophisticated than they could ever imagine. But I wasn't going to fight this battle in courtrooms or family meetings. I was going to use the most powerful weapon in my arsenal, their own greed, to destroy them completely. The plan that formed in my mind that night was so elegant, so perfectly suited to their criminal psychology, that I almost smiled thinking about their faces when they realized what they'd lost. My children wanted my money so badly they were willing to have me declared mentally incompetent to get it. Fine. I was going to give them exactly what they thought they wanted and then watch them destroy each other fighting over nothing. The war was about to begin, and only one person in this family was walking away with anything. The next morning, I did something I'd never done in 32 years of investigating financial crimes. I decided to become the criminal, at least on paper. But instead of stealing money, I was going to steal something much more valuable from my children, their certainty that they could abuse me without consequences. My plan was elegantly simple. If my children wanted to treat me like I was mentally incompetent, I'd give them something much better. They'd think I was dead. And I'd watch them tear each other apart, fighting over an inheritance that no longer existed. My first call was to Dr. Amanda Foster, a colleague from my IRS days who'd left government service to become a private physician. Amanda, I need a favor that's going to sound crazy, but I'll explain everything later. Vivian Thompson asking for crazy favors? This should be interesting. I need you to help me fake my own death for about 6 months, just long enough to catch some criminals in the act. Amanda had worked financial crime cases with me for 15 years. She knew I wouldn't ask for something like this without good reason. What kind of criminals are we talking about? The kind that raised me for 40 years and are now planning to steal everything I own. Within 2 hours, Amanda had arranged everything. A death certificate citing complications from previous stroke, a cooperative funeral director who specialized in witness protection cases, and a closed casket funeral that would satisfy my children's greed without requiring an actual body. The funeral home handles cases for federal witnesses all the time, Amanda explained. They'll stage everything perfectly. Your children will get the death certificate, the funeral service, and legal standing to fight over your estate. But the centerpiece of my plan wasn't the fake death, it was what I'd done with my $2.3 million fortune 3 days. Earlier, I'd liquidated every asset I owned and transferred the money to an offshore trust based in the Cayman Islands, managed by a firm that specialized in asset protection for federal investigators. Every dollar of my life savings disappeared into accounts my children couldn't access, couldn't trace, and couldn't steal no matter what legal documents they produced. Mrs. Thompson, your assets are completely protected, confirmed David Chen, the international banking specialist who'd handled the transfers. The trust is irrevocable and can only be dissolved by you personally. If anyone else tries to access the funds, they'll discover the accounts are empty. My Chicago house, My investment accounts, my retirement funds, even my checking account. Everything was gone, transferred to legal entities my children had never heard of and couldn't touch. The fake funeral was a masterpiece of theater. Amanda had arranged for a body double in the closed casket, complete with my favorite dress and jewelry. Marcus, Denise, and Kevin played the role of grieving children perfectly, while I watched the entire service from Amanda's car parked across the street. "She looks so peaceful," Denise sobbed dramatically. Knowing the casket was closed and she couldn't actually see anything. "Mama worked so hard for this family," Kevin added with fake emotion. "At least she knew we'd take care of everything she built." Marcus, ever the lawyer, was already calculating probate timelines and asset distribution schedules during his own mother's funeral service. The reading of my will took place the following week in Robert Williams' office. I watched through a video feed Amanda had arranged, seeing my children's faces as they learned they were inheriting exactly what they deserved. I leave my entire estate, valued at approximately $2.3 million, to be divided equally among my 3 children. Robert read from the document I'd prepared specifically for this moment. Marcus, Denise, and Kevin smiled with barely concealed greed, already mentally spending money that no longer existed. But then came the twist that made 32 years of forensic accounting expertise worth every moment. However, all assets have been transferred to irrevocable trust accounts that can only be accessed if my children can prove they never attempted to have me declared mentally incompetent or steal from me while I was alive. The color drained from their faces as Robert continued, reading, "If any evidence exists of conspiracy, fraud, or elder abuse planning, the entire estate will be donated to the National Association for Financial Crime Prevention, and my children will receive nothing." Marcus jumped up from his chair. "That's impossible! Mama didn't know about any. I mean, there's no evidence of anything like that." "Actually, there is," Robert replied, opening a file folder. "Your mother hired private investigators 6 months ago. Every email, every phone call, every meeting with elder law attorneys, it's all documented and verified. Jennifer Martinez had been recording everything, their conspiracy meetings, their debt-fueled spending, their plans to have me declared incompetent. Every criminal conversation was captured, time-stamped, and legally admissible. Your mother also liquidated all her assets before her death and placed them beyond your reach," Robert continued. "The house is owned by a trust. The investment accounts are empty. Even her checking account was closed. You're inheriting nothing but debt and the consequences of your criminal conspiracy." The screaming that followed was exactly what I'd expected. Marcus accused Denise of being too obvious. Denise blamed Kevin for involving his bank girlfriend. Kevin claimed the whole thing was Marcus's idea because he was the lawyer. Within 30 minutes, they were threatening to sue each other, demanding equal shares of nothing, and destroying the family relationships they'd already poisoned with greed. I sat in Amanda's car, watching my children realize they'd lost everything, not just the money, but each other. Their criminal conspiracy had cost them their inheritance, their family bonds, and their reputations in the community. But they hadn't lost just my money. They'd lost me forever, and they didn't even know I was still alive to see their greed destroy everything they'd ever valued. 6 months after my funeral, I did something no mother should ever have to do. I returned from the dead to watch my children destroy each other over money they'd never deserved and could never have. What I witnessed during those months of observing their behavior from beyond the grave taught me everything I needed to know about the people I'd raised, loved, and sacrificed everything to support. Amanda had arranged for me to live quietly in a lakefront cottage in Wisconsin while my children fought over my non-existent estate. Every week, Jennifer Martinez provided detailed reports of their activities, their legal battles, and their complete moral collapse. Vivian, your children have hired 3 different law firms to contest your will, Jennifer reported during one of our calls. They're spending thousands of dollars they don't have, trying to break a trust they can't access to steal money that isn't there. Marcus had mortgaged his house to pay legal fees, convinced he could overturn my estate planning and access the offshore accounts. Denise had borrowed against her credit cards to hire forensic accountants who confirmed what she refused to accept. My money was completely beyond their reach. Kevin had sold his car and moved back in with his ex-wife, begging for loans to fund his share of the legal assault on my estate, but the most satisfying part of my revenge was watching them turn on each other with the same ruthless greed they'd planned to use against me. Marcus is claiming he deserves a larger share because he's the eldest, Jennifer continued. Denise says she should get more because she was the only daughter. Kevin is threatening to expose their original conspiracy unless they give him equal treatment. The family I'd built through 40 years of love and sacrifice was destroying itself in exactly the way I'd predicted. When criminals have no honor among themselves, they eventually consume each other. The breaking point came when Marcus discovered that Kevin had been secretly meeting with my estate attorney, trying to cut a side deal for information about the trust accounts. "That little bastard is trying to screw us over," Marcus screamed at Denise during a phone conversation Jennifer had recorded. "After everything we planned together, he's stabbing us in the back for a bigger share." "Maybe we should call off this whole thing," Denise suggested weakly. "We're spending more on lawyers than we'll ever recover, and people are starting to ask questions about why we're so desperate for Mama's money." "We're not calling off anything," Marcus replied with the cold calculation I'd heard in his voice that first night. "That money belongs to us, and I'll destroy both of you before I let you walk away with more than your fair share." By month 4, my children had stopped speaking to each other entirely. They'd hired separate attorneys, filed competing claims against my estate, and begun spreading rumors in the community about each other's financial problems and criminal intentions. The Chicago Tribune ran a feature story about the Thompson family trust battle that exposed their conspiracy to have me declared incompetent, their massive debts, and their complete inability to access the inheritance they'd assumed was theirs. The deceased woman's children spent over $200,000 in legal fees trying to access a trust fund that may not exist, the article reported. Sources close to the family suggest the legal battle has destroyed their relationships and left them in worse financial condition than before their mothers. Death. Reading that article from my Wisconsin cottage, I felt the deep satisfaction that comes from perfect justice served exactly as planned. But I wasn't finished with my revenge yet. After 6 months of watching my children destroy each other, I was ready for the final act of this drama, my resurrection from the dead, to claim the life they'd tried to steal from me. On a Tuesday morning in March, I walked into Robert Williams' office very much alive, very much in possession of my mental faculties, and very much in control of the $2.3 million my children had assumed they could steal. "Hello, Robert. I believe my children have been asking about my estate. I thought it was time to clear up any confusion about my death." Robert's face went white, then broke into the biggest smile I'd seen in months. "Vivian Thompson, you magnificent, brilliant, terrifying woman. Please tell me you recorded everything. Every conversation, every legal filing, every criminal conspiracy. I have 6 months of evidence showing exactly who my children really are when they think nobody's watching." That afternoon, I had Jennifer Martinez call Marcus, Denise, and Kevin to inform them that their mother was very much alive and wanted to see them immediately. The family meeting that followed was everything I'd hoped it would be. Marcus walked into my living room like he was seeing a ghost, which in a way he was. Denise started crying before she even sat down. Kevin looked like he wanted to run back to Wisconsin himself. "Surprise," I said calmly. "I'm not dead, but your inheritance is." For the next hour, I laid out everything I'd witnessed during my 6 months of being legally deceased. Their criminal conspiracy, their greed, their willingness to have their own mother declared mentally incompetent for money, and most importantly, how they destroyed each other the moment they thought I couldn't stop them. "The $2.3 million you tried to steal is safe in accounts you'll never access," I concluded. "But more than that, you've shown me exactly who you are when you think nobody's watching. And what I've seen are 3 criminals who would rather destroy their family than earn their own way in life." I ended that meeting with the words I'd been rehearsing for 6 months. "You wanted to bury your mother to get her money. Instead, you buried yourselves. Don't contact me again. You're dead to me now, just like I was dead to you when you thought you could profit from it. Today, I'm 73 years old, living comfortably in a new city under a new name, with my $2.3 million estate intact and growing. My children are strangers to me now, exactly as they chose to be when they decided money mattered more than family. People sometimes ask if I feel guilty about faking my death and destroying my children's lives so completely. But I sleep peacefully every night knowing I taught them the most important lesson of their lives. When you try to bury someone who built a career catching criminals, you better make sure you kill them first." The last thing I want to say is this: protect your assets, trust your instincts, and never assume that family members won't betray you for money. Sometimes the people who raised you will still try to bury you, and when that happens, the only response is to bury them first. Because when your own children become your enemies, survival isn't personal, it's justice. And that's how I learned that trust is both our greatest gift and our biggest risk. What would you have done in my situation? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe to Granny Story Corner for more stories that make us think, feel, and grow. See you in the next story, my dear listeners.